Yeah. So how did the Hillmans end up here in Hinsdale?
Well, my grandpa came from Wisconsin. Grandpa Roy Hillman and Grandma Leon. My grandma Leon, she was raised in Big Sandy.
Oh, okay.
And she's got relatives in Big Sandy, and I still got relatives there. I don't see them very often anymore, but anyway, my grandpa came up here and took over the First National Bank, which is Opportunity Bank now. And then when my dad got out of the Navy, my dad went in the Navy in I think it was 42, during World War II. My grandpa had taken over the bank, and my dad went in the Navy, which my grandpa didn't like, but Dad joined. And, well, to put it bluntly, Grandpa took over the bank and Dad stayed there. And after a while, after my grandpa passed away, Dad took over the bank and got the controlling interest. And
so it was more than just managing it; they were also had ownership in the bank.
Right, and Dad finally retired when I think he was 81 or something. But yeah, he retired. He lasted about 11 years and then passed away. But that's how they got there.
So, what was your grandfather like? Did you get to spend time with him as a kid?
Oh yes, in fact, I went all over the United States with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, heck, we drove to California when I was 14. That's when I got my driver's license.
Did he make you drive the whole way?
Oh, I drove quite a ways. Yep.
How long did that take back then? I'm guessing that you weren't going 70 at that point.
No, it took us about we weren't in a hurry, according to my grandpa. Took us about 2.5 days. He had a brother that lived in California. So we drove back there and picked up a friend of mine in Helena and had a cousin go with us, Curtis Blockus. And we had a gay old time.
Yeah, what was it like? Because were the interstates
No,
established by then? No, it was all just state highways.
Well, there was a couple places that there was interstate, but it was mostly 2-lane highways. There was 51 Oldsmobile we drove.
I'm guessing about 55 everywhere?
Yeah. Oh, they'd go like a maniac.
Oh, really?
Oh, man. Oh, yeah, you could go 100 miles an hour in them. They were big car.
Yeah, what was California like on that trip?
Some place that I'd never want to live.
Oh, even back then, huh?
Yeah. Too many people. And even back then, it jam-packed with people going to work and coming from work half the time. And it's just, I don't know how people take it, to be honest with you.
I agree.
Billings drives me nuts.
Well, it's growing right now.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. So was your grandfather a pretty kind man? Was he quiet? Was he humorous? What kind of personality did he have?
He was, I would say, half quiet. I mean, he did a lot of thinking. You'd talk to him and he'd think about what you said and then he'd talk back to you, and he was a heck of a basketball man. He hauled in the 50s. I'm trying to remember. But he had that 51 Oldsmobile he had. It was a 4-door. And him and some other guys around town, they hauled our basketball team all over northeastern Montana.
It wasn't much for buses at that point then.
Didn't have a bus to haul. And when I was in high school, the first one bus that we only had one big bus, and that was an old international, and we went to a lot of ball games in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, my grandpa, he was all over this part of the state, hauling kids back and forth to games. He was a big basketball fan of Hinsdale.
Yeah. What were the games like back then? I know the gyms and the rules have changed quite a bit over the years, and we've lost some teams.
Yeah, basically about the same. The rules have really changed. I mean, they've really changed since I was reffing. I don't understand half the game anymore.
They've changed again since I was in high school.
So, anyway, yeah, you didn't have, actually, I can't remember if there was a restriction. Yeah, there was on timeouts, I think you got to have 4 or something like that. I just can't remember.
Yeah.
But
Was it a civil game at that point, or were there some pretty strong rivalries? Was it roughhouse?
It was strong, between Saco and Hinsdale especially. Holy cow. Hinsdale hated Saco and Saco hated Hinsdale, and that didn't get over for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And that was even adults and so on and so forth, not just kids.
Yeah. Did it surprise you when those schools decided to co-op for sports?
No, it didn't. In fact, it helped the communication between the two. It really helped the two towns get along.
Kind of eased that generational rivalry.
That rivalry was getting over, but there was still some there. Now it's, well, we wouldn't have a team if we didn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, Whitewater, Saco, or Hinsdale might have a team, but you'd have about 8 or 9 players, and that would be it. And besides that, look what they accomplished.
Yeah. Well, between your years of getting to play and then getting to watch your kids and your grandkids play, what were some highlights? What were some special moments or your favorite games?
Well, really don't have any other than state tournaments were my favorite moments. Well, actually, the tournaments that we played here, district and divisional, because we were always in the mix and always right in there. It seemed like, anyway. And of course, when Tyler was in high school, he turned out to be quite a ball player. And I was all over the country with that.
Yeah. Were there any other schools and their gyms that you really enjoyed going to, or any of them that you maybe dreaded when you had to go to that school?
No, not really.
I know for us, Luster was always interesting because they had a different type of floor on that rubber gym there for a while.
Yeah, that was a terrible floor. In fact, Gary Klin and I were reffing at the time, and we went up there and it was about 30 below out that night. It was cold. In fact, it's funny they didn't cancel the game. But we went up there and we had to call the game in the third quarter because the tile floor, that's what they had on the floor was tile.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And it started to sweat from cold and heat. I don't know what caused it to start to sweat, but it was tile on concrete is what it was. And it got so slick that we couldn't stand up. The kids couldn't stand up.
That sounds pretty dangerous.
And it was. We finally quit the game. It'd go to stop and you'd slide. And anyway, they didn't. That only lasted a couple of years, and they changed their floor.
Yeah, I can't say that I've ever seen a tile floor for basketball.
Yeah, it was tile.
Mm-hmm. So your grandfather was at the bank, your dad was at the bank.
Right.
Did you think that you had a little bit different childhood than some of the other kids in the community just because your family had a little bit more secure occupation than some of the others, or
No.
fit in just right there with everyone else?
Right. No, my granddad and my dad being in the bank didn't affect my upbringing at all. I mean, wish I'd had the money.
It was being put to work, huh?
Yeah.
You know? What was your grandmother like?
She was kind of a plump lady, very smart, and very caring. I spent a lot of, in fact, I spent a lot of time with them. All of us grandkids did then, who were here. And we usually, a lot of times, stayed at their house if my folks went somewhere or had to be gone or something. Yeah, I miss them, and I've missed them for a long time, but we all get old.
Time just keeps going on, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Did you guys do most of your holidays over there with your grandparents?
Yeah. And then my aunts and uncles, like Christmas and Thanksgiving, when they were closer to our community, they'd show up.
Yeah. Was your grandmother kind of the matriarch and kind of kept everyone together, or?
Basically.
Yeah, what did those holidays look like? What'd you guys have for dinner? What you cooked? Did you guys go to church on any of them?
Oh yeah.
You guys have different games and stuff?
Usually turkey, chicken, who knows? My grandma could cook. She could cook. And she could be bossy.
Did you have to behave around grandma?
Pretty much. She'd only let us go so far, and then there'd be a chewing out coming. Yeah, she was a great lady.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a favorite meal that she would cook?
Not really. Anything she cooked, I ate. But now I'm trying to think of. I can't remember what year it was she passed away now. But my grandpa passed away when he was 70. He had lung cancer. Of course, he was a chain smoker. And my grandmother passed away, I can't remember what year, but she had bad heart. Her heart went haywire. She'd been in the hospital a couple times in Glasgow, and then she had to go to the hospital in Billings, and she was in her 70s, but I can't remember what year.
So was your other set of grandparents over in Big Sandy then?
No, in Minnesota.
Oh, they were all the way back in Minnesota.
Yeah, in fact, I never knew. And they were divorced a long time ago.
Oh.
And I never really knew my grandpa there. My grandmother I knew. I used to go to us kids, Judy and I, when we were little. Rode the train a couple times to Minnesota and stay with her for 2 or 3 weeks, and then ride the train back. Always had a lunch packed.
What was it like traveling by train?
It was all right. Took about, I can't remember, it seemed like it took a long time, but
It was a
I think
long ways.
I think it took about 12 or 13, no, more than that, maybe 17, 18 hours, but yeah, we didn't have TV here then, and they had TV in Minneapolis, and Judy and I, when we'd get back there, we'd lay on the living room floor and we were glued to that thing all day.
Was it a little hard to get you to come home?
Yeah, yeah, that TV, I'll tell you, I'll never forget it. We just were glued to it.
Yeah. So how many siblings do you have?
You mean
How many siblings did you have? Was it just
Tyler?
no, not kids. How many
Oh.
siblings did you have? Brothers, sisters?
Oh, brother and sister. I had Judy and Gary and Shirley.
Yeah.
And Shirley and Judy passed away.
Yeah.
So now there's Gary and I, and that's it.
How was that dynamic with your siblings growing up?
Good. Good. Oh, we fought and argued just like brothers and sisters do.
Yeah.
Usually I lost, but with Judy, my older sister. But yeah, we were a pretty close family.
Yeah. Were there any games you guys liked playing, or any times you guys would get into mischief?
Well, I don't know about games. Mischief, I'm not going to say a word.
Plead the fifth, are you?
Yeah. Especially me.
Yeah. So you mentioned that your grandpa didn't really want your dad to go into the Navy.
He wanted him to stay in the bank because he wanted my dad to take over the bank.
Was that something that, was that one of those jobs that you could have gotten out of service? Or
No.
was that was one that if he had gotten pulled, he would have had to go either way?
He insisted with my grandpa. He told my grandpa that everybody else around here had been drafted or went to the surface. World War II. Mm-hmm. My dad made up his mind that everybody else is going, and here I am, and I'm not going. And he made up his mind he's going in, and he did.
Mm-hmm. So was he in the Pacific Theater then?
Yeah, and he was stationed on an island called Peleliu. And in fact, he was there when the Japanese invaded it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he ended up working in an office on Peleliu. And when the Japs were really invading, and of course we beat them back, he said he got under his desk. He was an office guy, an office worker. But I got some pictures somewhere of where his office was and some other guys' offices, and it was a rounded Quonset on this island. He said, boy, did it get hot.
I can imagine.
But that's where he was.
Yeah, and I've watched the little interview that Derek did with him. Sounds like he had quite a passion for airplanes as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he owned 3 of them.
Oh, really?
One of them the hangar caught on fire over here and burned up. And never did find out what caused it. And the second one, out by where Mix lives, you know, right there by the cemetery. Just this side of the cemetery, there was an airstrip.
Yep.
First one. And that's where he had his 2-seat Aeronica tied down at. That's where the strip was. We used to walk out there when we'd go flying all the time. Anyway, had a heck of a wind, and it somehow blew over, and it just scattered that plane all over the place. And then the third one he had, him and Rex Stacie, who was superintendent here then, who was a good friend of my dad and my grandpa. In fact, his son and I were good buddies. Anyway, they were deer hunting south of Malta, and Dad had his Aeronica out there, and it was a 2-seater. And anyway, whatever they were doing, they sat down, and maybe to take a leak, I don't know. But anyway, they sat down, and when he went to take off, just about to be airborne, they hit a rock, and it bounced the plane up in the air, but he didn't have enough airspeed to keep going, and they went across the coulee and into the other side.
Oh.
Nosed right into the other side of the coulee. Rex, his head hit the dash, and he broke his nose. But Dad, it snapped him far enough ahead that it broke his back.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he ended up in a hospital in a body cast for about 6 months.
Well, he's probably lucky to have survived that.
Well, they both are.
It's not a whole lot different than just running the plane into a brick wall.
But he had enough airspeed, he said, to pancake it instead of nose it.
Mm.
And but it was
That's
pretty
probably
hard.
what saved them.
Yeah, it is. So
Yeah.
anyway, after that, he didn't get another. Well, yeah, he did too. He had another one. It was a four-placer, but I can't remember what it was.
Mm.
In fact, we were flying to the state tournament in Helena, but I didn't make it all the way. I got airsick, so they dropped me off with some friends in Chinook.
And they kept going without
and
you.
They, and they kept going without me. Without me, yeah. It was a four-seater.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like you had a pretty good relationship with your dad. And
Oh yeah.
seemed like he was pretty open about his service and everything else. But I'm guessing that you had probably a lot of friends and classmates that their parents were also in the war that
Oh yeah.
probably didn't talk about it. Did that kind of define how they would grow up if that war affected their parents?
I don't think so. They,
Everyone just dealt with it in
to
their
us,
own way.
us kids who were pretty little then, I mean, we knew our dad was gone and where he was at, but it was something that everybody had to do. In fact, we thought we would probably have to, and I did. And the draft was still going when I was old enough to be drafted, and I found out from the gal in Glasgow who was on the draft board. She told my dad that in the next, I can't remember what month it was, but in the next 30 days I'd probably be coming up to be drafted. So I didn't wait 30 days. I went in the Navy. I was not going in the Army.
No.
And that's where a lot of guys that got drafted went.
So was the Navy seen as maybe a little bit of a safer branch to go into, maybe not on the front lines?
Oh yeah, for me it was. Well, I'm sure it was for a lot of guys. I ended up being on 2 aircraft carriers. And I think that was that would have been one of the safest places in the world, but a lot of them got shot down, or a lot of planes got shot down. During World War II, it didn't matter where you were at. It wasn't good. But I was in peacetime, and we'd fly 24 hours a day, sometimes all week long.
So she said that you were about to be drafted, but your actual service was during peace. So was that at the very end of a conflict then?
No, that was between
Okay,
everything. There was nothing really going on.
gotcha. So between which conflicts were you in the service then?
Between Vietnam and shoot, I don't remember,
Okay.
but I was on the West Coast,
Okay.
and a friend of mine, Jim Koski, he was in the Navy, and he was on it. Or no, Milton Esselson. He was in the Navy, and he was on a carrier, but he was on the East Coast. And I'm trying to think. Jim Tolson, he was in the Navy, and he was on the East Coast, and he was on a carrier.
What was that like being on a carrier at that point? Because I mean that must have been quite a change from small town. I mean there were more men in that ship than there was in the town you came
There were
from.
more men on that ship at that time than there was in Glasgow. And right now the carriers, you got 4,000 men on. And the carriers are a little smaller now than what we were on. But 3,000 guys, 3,500 guys, easy. And we'd go to sea and fly, always practicing, all the time, practicing war scenarios and everything. And we lost planes and pilots. In fact, the first cruise I went on, which is you went overseas for, and like Japan, all those ports overseas, Philippines, and we lost 16 airplanes and 15 pilots in that cruise.
Oh well, just through exercises.
Well, we lost 3 pilots and planes. One night, we were out at sea, and couldn't avoid a big storm that was coming. We'd go right through these big storms with that carrier, but we couldn't avoid it. This is a story I got. And so we flew all our planes off that were flyable. And somehow or another, they got tangled up in that storm or something happened, but we lost 3 planes and pilots.
Was it typically seen as safer for the planes to be in the air than on the carrier during those storms?
That I don't know. But I'll tell you, it could have been, because we went through some rough seas and never did anything, but this storm was, it was something. I spent 3 days I never got in my bunk, couldn't stay in it. Just a ship would roll like this, and the flight deck is 40 feet off the water, or 50 feet off the water, the bow. And the bow would go down in the trough, and nothing but a wall of water would come up across the flight deck.
Must have been pretty dangerous.
It was scary. And I slept on the tail of an airplane for 3 days running, when I had to sleep.
Wow. What was your job on the ship?
So I worked on the hangar deck. Our crew, we parked in airplanes that weren't flying, would come down on an elevator. We had 3 elevators, one on the starboard side, and one on the bow. This is on the midway, and one on the port side. Starboard is right, port is left. And when we were flying, nothing that was flyable would come down on the elevators, and we'd park them on the hangar deck. And that's where my job was. And other than that, sometimes it got kind of boring, but sometimes you never got any sleep.
Yeah. What would guys come up with to kill the time to keep from being bored? Lots of
cribbage playing. Lots of cribbage playing. A lot of payrolls changing hands.
Oh, it had to be for money, huh?
It was always for money.
It wasn't a real game if it wasn't for money, huh?
Right.
So was there any place in the ship that, people would sneak away to get a moment to themselves, or any space that you kind of would go to when you needed a minute?
Oh yeah, you had, if you're at flight quarters, we had conflags, it's called 1, 2, conflag on the midway, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In fact, that's where we stood watches. It was a conflag on the inside of the ship. It was up on the 01 level, and you had 2 windows, little windows like this, and glass that thick. But you could look down on the hangar deck, and you just kept an eye on the 4-hour watches, and you kept an eye out on the hangar deck for anybody who might be screwing around or something wrong. Or actually, it was just part of the Navy's, the way they did things.
Just to keep everything on the up and up?
Right. So it was pretty boring, actually.
So did they keep most of their shenanigans for when they would have leave and you guys could go ashore?
What do you mean?
Well, you said that you had watch and you had to make sure that no one was screwing around, essentially.
This is out at sea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then did guys let loose when they got R&R?
Oh yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. We rode like in the Philippines. Or no, it was Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, we anchor out of there. Couldn't go in port. We were too big, as far as draft under the boat. So we'd anchor out about a mile in deeper water and ride the Liberty boats back and forth. You send a bunch of sailors to town and a little booze and look out Charlie Brown. There were more fights on those Liberty boats going back to the ship than you can shake a stick at.
I can only imagine.
It was some guy got beat up pretty bad. It was bad. But you get them full of beer or whatever they drink. And
Were there any of those ports that you would have liked to have gone back and visited?
oh yeah, Hong Kong was one of them. Hong Kong actually, pretty nice city, and for the most part in a lot of places. And of course Pearl Harbor in Hawaii.
Was that pretty well recovered and back to normal at that point, or was everything still pretty somber after the
No,
war?
it's pretty good. It was a good port of call. I had a cousin that was in the Navy at the time. His name was Elgin Burns. They used to live in a house where Gooder Johns lived, but yeah, it was. Elgin was in the destroyers, and there was about 20. There was a pier that went out quite a ways. And it was called Tin Can Alley. That's where a bunch of destroyers tied up when they were in port. There'd be 20, 24 of them or something like that, all in a line.
What was I guess the term would be, what was the biggest fish in the sea at that moment? Was it the aircraft carriers, the destroyers, the subs? What was the most dangerous thing out there with you?
Actually, all of them. I mean,
They all had their own means, huh?
yeah. On a carrier, I was on 4 cruises. We called them cruises. They were a lot of work. I was on 4 cruises, and every cruise we lost planes and pilots. That was the thing that bothered me.
Was it just from accidents and that there was no actual contact, I guess would be the word, with enemies? It was just failures of aircraft, basically?
Something had happened. A lot of times, 2 or 3 or 4, a couple at least, it seemed like, on the cruises would landing come in too low and hit on the back of the ship on the flight deck. On the rear of the ship on the flight deck, you had what we called a round down, and the deck come out like this and then rounded down about 10 feet. And some planes, if they came in, actually got too low, if they hit the round down, it would bounce them up around on the flight deck. But sometimes, instead of stopping, the plane would go all the way up the flight deck on the angle part of the deck. The flight deck was like this. You had the straight deck going all the way to the bow, and the angle deck was this way, and that's which way the planes landed and took landing stuff. And the deck going towards the bow, that's where the catapults were. So you're flying planes off the bow and bringing planes in on the rear end of the ship with 4 cables, big cables, probably that big around. Tail hook would grab the cable and stop the plane.
Everything had to be pretty well coordinated, I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah. And those guys that flew those planes, they would amaze you how they could do it. But
Pretty tough job.
oh, I wouldn't have wanted it. But those guys were good.
You're saying you didn't have the the need to fly like your dad? That wasn't something on that plane that or on that carrier that ever tempted you to hop in that plane?
Oh no, when I got out, I took flying lessons, but to me, I wouldn't want to have been an aircraft carrier pilot.
The jets were maybe a little too much and the
Oh,
runway
boy.
a little too short.
Oh boy. Yeah, we'd turn into the wind. There always seemed like there was a breeze out at sea, or some kind of a wind. When we'd launch aircraft, we'd turn into the breeze or this wind to get more wind across the deck, and the carrier would speed up to about 30 knots, which is a knot is a mile something, but up to about 30 knots to get more wind across the deck, and then away they go.
Yeah, if you're driving into the wind, it probably is pretty windy up there then.
Yeah, it is. And then, but those planes, they had, by the time they went off the end of that short catapult, it was short. It was from 0 to 150 and nothing flat.
Wow.
And they'd go down, a lot of them, sometimes, they'd go off of the end of the flight deck, the catapult shooting them off. And if you were standing on the, say halfway down the flight deck and watching the plane, he'd go down below the bow like this and then back up. God almighty. Few times I saw that, that was scary.
A couple heart attacks, huh?
But that's what they did.
Did you guys ever think that you were gonna get pulled into a conflict?
No, not really.
No, it was enough of a lull that everyone was.
There was stuff going on. There always is something going on. But no, I never really thought. Can't think of anything anyway.
Did the soldiers find a way to get off the ship and go for a swim from time to time? Was that something that boat was capable of doing?
That we didn't do.
Would you have braved it in those open waters?
No. No. The thing that we look forward to is hurry up and get this week over with. We can go back in port. Yeah, it was an experience.
Yeah. So what was life like coming out of the military? Was it an easy transition to go back to normal life?
Oh yeah, yeah. Get back home with friends. I didn't have anybody telling me what to do all the time. But a lot of our time when we were flying, we launched aircraft, and I worked on the hangar deck, and the planes that were going to fly, we'd send them up to the flight deck on the elevators, and then in between flights like that, we had a lot of downtime. Or you got put to work sweeping the deck or something like that, or chipping non-skid. That was something they put on the deck that had a kind of a grainy, sandy feel to it.
And something to give it some traction?
Give traction to the tires on the planes.
Anything to make sure that plane stopped when it came in, huh?
Right, and then, well, it was on the hangar deck and on the flight deck, so that if the plane put on these brakes,
Oh, so it wouldn't just slide around.
just going up, or going up, they'd be fired up and then go up to the catapult to get hooked up to get catapulted off, and on the hangar deck, ship would go like this or like this, and it was just if you had a guy in the cockpit and we were moving it, he could put the brakes on if it started to slide or something. Yeah, that was quite an experience. I saw a lot of fights. You got guys from all over the United States on that thing. I had some good buddies. Even some colored guys were good friends of mine. In fact, when I was in boot camp, I had a really good friend who was a colored guy.
Did you see that there were a lot of people that had a hard time adjusting to that?
There were a few. They came from places and cities that where there's trouble all the time. But not a lot. Like I say, there were 3,000 of us on there.
Yeah.
We had a few guys. We had one guy in our division though that I didn't have much to do with. He was different, and of course, there's some of us that were different too. But
You got to figure it out one way or another when you're all put in a can together.
yeah,
What was chow like on a boat like that?
what was that?
Food.
Good. We ate better than the guys on shore.
Really?
Yep. We had guys on shore that would come aboard, and they couldn't get over how we got fed according to what they got fed.
They evidently wanted to make sure you guys were happy and well fed.
God, we ate good. I mean, and the cooks were good. I mean, it was good chow. Yeah, I remember Christmas and Thanksgiving. You got the traditional Christmas food and Thanksgiving food. If we had a holiday meal, you got 2 packs of cigarettes. Every sailor that went through the line got cigarettes, whether he smoked or not.
I'm assuming it was like a commodity if you didn't smoke and you could trade it for something.
Yeah, I smoked, so I smoked.
Just trading them away wasn't your concern.
Yeah. Oh, back in those days, everybody, it seemed like, smoked. God. In my lifetime, I must have smoked millions of cigarettes.
What were your thoughts as that's changed over the years? I mean, when they started changing the rules about advertisement, and I'm assuming when you were small, they were just over the counter, you could buy them anywhere, and now they're kind of under lock and key.
Yeah.
I mean, here just a few years ago, they upped the age to buy tobacco again to 21, like alcohol.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that was in the middle of COVID they did that, just the last few years.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. I thought if you were 18, you could buy them.
Not anymore.
Yeah, but I've seen people buy cigarettes up here and never show an ID.
Well, I guess I should rephrase. You're not supposed to be able to.
Oh, okay.
But I'm assuming that's just like alcohol in most places. I've heard stories of people here that even after the age got upped, that they thought if you were a senior, you were old enough to drink.
Well, back in the day when I was growing up, you hardly met anybody that didn't smoke. I mean, husbands and wives and the whole ball of wax. My mom and dad smoked for years. My granddad smoked.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother didn't. But I was smoking when I was 14, 12. Sneaking cigarettes and sneaking out of school to smoke, and took 12, 13 years ago, took a heart attack to get me to quit.
Mm-hmm. What was it like going to school in Hinsdale?
It was great. It was great.
Yeah, because you would have been in the 2-story schoolhouse, correct?
Yep, been in the old school.
Yep. So was the elementary on the main floor, and then high
Yeah,
school was
the
above?
first and second grade room, and the 3rd and 4th grade room were on the main floor. You had a set of double doors in the middle at street level, and the 1st and 2nd grade was on the left-hand side after you went in the doors of the school. And also on that level and down about 5 feet was a gym floor ahead of you. And before the gym was built, that's where they played basketball,
Okay.
where the stage used to be. And so you had the 1st and 2nd grade room on the left-hand side when you went in the front door of the school, and the 3rd and 4th grade classes on the right-hand side, to the right on the hallway. And then a set of stairs on each end. And you went up the stairs when you went in, on the left-hand side was a set of stairs. You went up to the 5th and 6th grade room. On the right-hand side was a set of stairs, and you went up to the 7th and 8th grade room. And in the middle, between those two, was a big study hall with windows in the back. And you could go back and look at the river.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's right on the riverbank, actually.
Yeah, because it was farther back
Way
than
back.
the present school.
Yep. And actually, the back of the school was a little farther back than what the back is now. But I'm trying to figure out how they did it. The first expanding they did, they went west, and then had a hallway that went down with classrooms
Okay.
on the main floor. But I was trying to remember.
I do know that when we put that little greenhouse in behind the current school, we hit part of the old foundation.
Oh, yeah.
So I know roughly where that is. And I found out that when they tore down the old school, they must not have hauled very much away, because I think they just piled all the junk in it and smoothed it over.
That's what they did, a lot of it.
There was a lot of iron down there.
Yeah, they did a lot of it.
Yeah, that's why we moved that greenhouse about 10 feet over, because we were right on the corner. And we're like, we can't really dig through concrete.
But before they built the new school, the Legion Hall sat out front of the school, the big old Legion Hall, which is out of Boucher's now.
Yep.
And behind that, towards the park, was a big area where we played softball
Oh,
at noon. Yeah, we had a softball diamond out there. I mean, the school was way back, and out
so it
in
must have
front,
been right on the edge then.
and it was, I don't know how many feet, maybe 30 feet from the edge. And then out front of the school was a plank fence, 2x8s or whatever they were, three boards high. And on the left and out front was where all the swings and everything were. And on this side of this old school, and the gym was on this side and down. You went in the gym entrance, and then you went down. The gym was down in a hole, I called it. But there was a cannery built to the left of that, right by the park hill that's on this side.
So it would have been on this side of the road, almost by the
Yeah.
church then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was on the other side. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was on the school side.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's been quite a change since then.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that it took quite a bit to get that new school approved, because it had quite a footprint and moved a lot of buildings.
Yeah.
What was it like when you went from the elementary to the high school, and all of a sudden they would throw in the country kids? Because there were still at least a couple of, what there would have been, Snake Creek and Vandalia both would have still been operating at that point,
Yeah.
wouldn't they?
Actually, I never paid much attention to it.
Everyone just came in and you had new friends and
We pretty much knew everybody anyway. I mean, they all always came to town for something, and yeah, I never really thought about having.
it wasn't like when you moved to a new school you were already
Oh no.
you already all knew each other, so it wasn't a big difference. What was your favorite class in school?
Getting out. But they didn't have that class.
At least it wasn't approved.
Actually, I don't. Well, typing was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I got to be pretty good at typing.
Yeah, it's kind of a dying art at this point, sadly.
Well, I don't even know what you wouldn't know. You guys wouldn't know what a typewriter looks like.
I've used a typewriter, it's just been a long time. It was more for fun at that point.
I was 60 to 70 words a minute typer.
That's pretty good.
That wasn't bad.
Yeah. It takes some finger strength to use those.
And well, I grew up in an era where there were typewriters and that's it.
Yeah.
In fact, I was in typing when the first electric typewriters come out.
Was that a pretty big deal?
That was a hell of a transition from a manual U.S. Royal typewriter to one that if you had looked at it, it would type. I mean, you just barely touched those keys and you were putting something on the paper. And it took a little bit to get used to.
Yeah. One thing that I found interesting is I've read a lot of different papers and had some people write things for me. I can always find the people that learn to type on a typewriter because they still put the double space after the period. And it's funny. I've had some people where a couple people have worked on a document and I can tell them where they stopped and the next person started because of that, because one person will do it and the next person won't.
Yeah, it was a big change when electric typewriters come out, and then now nobody even types anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know how to.
It's all done with thumbs now.
Yeah. I'm from the old school. I don't even know how to turn a computer on. That's the truth. I mean, I know nothing about them, and I don't want to learn.
Some of them are complicated enough. It takes a little bit to get them where you need them to be.
This thing right here, 99% of it doesn't get used because I don't know how and I don't care to.
Did you ever imagine as a child or a young adult that you would get to the point where you could carry a phone?
No.
Was there still a switchboard in Hinsdale when you were a kid?
To begin with, but that was moved when I was, a long time ago. I'm trying to remember who. Actually, we had party lines then, that's what we had. And switchboard was in Glasgow, I think.
Okay.
I don't think we had it here. I don't remember it anyway. But we had party lines. I listened to a lot of good conversations that people had when I was a kid once in a while.
How many people would be on a party line? Like 3 or 4 houses? Or
3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 6.
just kind of whoever was on the block kind of is what it ended
The
up
way
being?
they blocked it out or however, I don't remember how they did it, but
So-
yeah, you pick up the phone to use it and somebody's already yakking and
So there was only ever actually maybe, 10 or so lines in the town and then everyone shared that party line is kind of how it worked?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. We were on a party line is all I know. And other people were on a different party line. And you could listen in on some pretty good, interesting conversations.
Were there quite a few tricks to make sure that you weren't caught?
Yeah, well, not quite a few. You had to be damn sure when you lifted up the doodad under the receiver that you barely moved it. You moved it real slow so it wouldn't make any sound, click or anything.
Yeah, I know my grandma used to talk about when her and I think Tookie Laycock would be visiting on the phone,
Oh,
and she could tell when Sherman would pick up the other phone because the volume would drop, because it would distribute the power between three, and you could tell that everything got a little quieter. Yeah. So what else was in around town at that point that's not here anymore? I know at one point we had an ice house and multiple bars and cafes. And,
yeah, we had post office, was down on the corner where Stowey's cabins are. Next door to that was Foggern's. That was the grocery store at one time. Next to that was the drugstore, and that belonged to Leslie's. And next to that was the Northern Hotel and bar and cafe.
had a lot going on.
It was all one. That's all gone now. Then next to that, you had Gasper's store, and that's gone. And then next to that, you had the Rainbow.
So was there anything in that gap between the grocery store and the Rainbow, or was that always just kind of an empty
Well,
lot?
there was, between the grocery store and the Rainbow was a shed probably, how wide probably from that wall to this wall.
Okay, only
It was about
15, 20 feet, something
just
like
a
that.
shed about that wide, and a long time ago, when guys were selling fireworks around here, they'd sell firecrackers and stuff out of that shed. And that was right next to the Rainbow Room, which is now a horseshoe pit.
Yeah.
And then across the street from there, going towards the Legion, was a locker store. It was a kind of a store, but people had lockers, freezer lockers. Had about 30 of them, if I remember right, in there.
So that was before people really had freezers in their own
yeah.
house. When did that kind of die off? When did it get to the point where everyone just kind of had their own?
Everybody didn't need them anymore. And it just kind of, I think the Farmers Union built it. I can't remember who built it. But, and then on the other side of that, to the south, is where we had a skating rink at one time.
So is that still on the same block as the Legion then?
Yeah, it's where the
Okay.
Legion is.
Okay, there was an ice rink there.
In that area, we had an ice skating rink. Yep, that's where I learned to ice skate. And then to the south of that yet, where the ice skating rink was, is where, just to the south of that, you had the ice skating rink, and then just to the south of that was a set of bulk tanks for the Phillips 66 station that was across the street on the corner
okay.
by the highway.
Gotcha.
And Bob McElvain had that. And then you came down the street where the big lot is, Legion lot, you had the Palace Inn bar.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, you had a liquor store. And I'm trying to remember what his name was. Anyway, there was a small, little kind of a shack, I called it, but it was a little, kind of a little house, and there was a guy that lived there, and I can't remember. Bill Dick, was that his name? I can't remember his name anyway. I think it was Bill Dick. And then, of course, then you had the grocery store. Then across the street you had the bank, and behind the bank, this way, was the liquor store.
Also, did we have two
No,
at the same time? Or
the one
did
on
we-
Main Street finally closed
Oh,
up.
okay. And then they moved.
And then they moved. And then behind that we kind of had it was kind of a, I'm trying to remember if the liquor store closed then or not. Anyway, behind that, Hopwoods had a store with hardware in it. like, and different things you could get. And then behind that, I can't remember what. Oh, that's where Doc Cockrell's office was.
How was that having a pioneer doctor in town?
That was great.
I've heard that he really enjoyed taking out tonsils.
He did. I can tell you that. Yeah, he did. He did a lot of that. I think I was 4 when mine were removed.
They got to come out sometime. Might as well just get them out.
They say they got to come out sometime. No, I had trouble with them. Yeah, I remember it. Sore throats I had. Then down the street you had the bank, of course, and then you had a barber shop. We had a woman barber here at one time. Her name was Ada. I'll never forget her. She wasn't a heck of a lot taller than me.
Oh, really?
And you didn't put anything over on her, I'll tell you. She was a very stern lady.
She was holding something sharp.
Yeah, but then you had then past the barber shop next to the bank where the post office is. Then you had a lot. That's where Fred Westrom and John Rosendahl at the time had machinery.
Mm-hmm.
International Harvester. And then of course you had the fire hall. And in the fire hall was our pull carts. That's what the hose was wrapped on. Yeah, every fire we had in town, you pulled a cart.
Just by hand, huh?
Yep. And then east of that was a park and a monument.
So when did they build the current Legion Hall?
80. I can tell you if I can remember. 68. They built the Legion Hall the same time they got done with the school.
That makes sense. That was probably a requirement if they were going to take away the current Legion Hall that needed to have a replacement.
That I couldn't tell you.
So how has that been over the years being part of the Legion? Has that been a good place for friendship and being able to share people with similar experiences?
Oh yeah, that's something this town needed. I mean, without it, people are going out of town enough the way it is to do things. Now they can get parties and stuff. They can do them here. But yeah, and we needed a Legion Hall. The old hall was. The Legion had the old hall, which is moved out to Boucher's now. The Legion had a space. You went up some stairs, and it wasn't a 2-story building, but it was high ceiling. And you had a compartment up there.
Kind of a loft almost?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, and that's where our Legion was.
Yeah. Well, I know one of my core memories is always going to the Memorial Day service with Dad every year, and just wanted to say that I always appreciate you and Sherman getting up there and reading those names, and that's always meant a lot to me getting to listen to that.
Boy, that was getting long.
Yeah. Well, I haven't served, and I can't imagine what it's like for you guys, but I know it gets more meaningful for me every year just because there's more and more people on it that I know.
Yeah.
When you're little and you hear all these people and you don't even know the last names because they've moved or married out, and you start adding Bear and Dennis and all those guys to it, I'm always impressed you guys can get through reading it without choking up.
Oh, I have to think about it a lot. But list gets longer.
Yeah.
But someday my name's going to be there, unless they decide I'm too ornery.
Yeah. So across from the Legion, my understanding, there used to be the depot over there across by the tracks.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like when we actually had train service?
What do you mean?
Well, the train obviously doesn't stop in Hinsdale to do anything, but
Well, yeah, they dropped off mail. In fact, a long time ago, Guy Seeley had a dray service, what they call a dray service. He had a truck, and he used to ice off of the river.
Mm.
And that's when I was little and growing up. We didn't have a refrigerator, we had an ice box when I was a kid for a while, before the refrigerators come out. Anyway, you'd put a chunk of ice in it. And Guy, he did the icing on the river, and he hauled ice around to everybody during the week. I can't imagine how we kept things cold, the more I think about it. But it worked. I mean, our milk and everything stayed cold.
Mm-hmm.
Not super cold like it does now, but
enough that it was safe.
yeah. Yeah, I rode with them guys. They had big buzz saws, and they cut chunks of ice this thick. Oh yeah, 2.5 foot chunks of ice on the river.
It must be pretty heavy.
There was a big warehouse they had up here, and they stored in that ice house and have it covered with straw. And it would keep during the summer.
I've heard a few stories of the town kids chasing them, trying to get chips of ice.
Oh yeah, I was one of them.
Sounds like it's almost better than the ice cream truck.
Oh.
Who would have thought that the ice out of this river would be drinkable?
Hey, we ate a lot of ice. We did.
The freezing process must take some of that dirt out of it.
Actually, you can't believe it, but those chunks of ice were clear. And they'd have a blue chin to them, just like water.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, just like if you caught bottled water.
Purified spring stuff, yeah.
But yeah, apparently, there was no sediment in it at all. It was just, and it wasn't milky, if I can remember. I remember right, because I ate a lot of it. The guy, he'd get blocks of ice and put them on his old flatboard Chevy truck, and he had a flat bed, and drive around town delivering ice every day.
Yeah, that's another job that doesn't exist anymore.
He used to have an old Model A sedan, and that's what the buzz saws were on. The big saw blades were on, back axle, and that's how they cut ice.
Oh, they used the car as the power.
The old. And yeah, and then they had big saws, but the hand saws, and they used them.
Pretty intensive process.
Yep. But he hauled a lot of ice out of that river.
Yeah, well, it sounds like everyone needed it.
Everybody used it. Oh hell, when I was a kid growing up, we had bottled milk was delivered to us every day if we needed it.
Where did the milk come from? Did that come from Malta or
Mixed dairy,
Okay.
west of town.
I wasn't sure how long that was a dairy or not,
Yeah, it was a dairy.
because I don't think it was still operational when Dwayne and Edith bought it, was it?
No. In fact, it's been a long time ago that was there. But quart bottles of milk with a paper plug on top.
Never saw the paper plugs, but saw plenty of the bottles growing up.
Yeah, they were out there. Yeah.
Yep, they're all gone now.
Are they?
Yeah.
Antiques.
Yeah, the ants took the last. There was about a case of them left. They took those.
Oh.
I think there were hundreds and hundreds of them when Mark and Mike were kids, but
Oh, there probably was.
from what I heard, they might have found a few games to play with them. Yeah, no, it was always fun running around there and finding stuff that was even before Grandma and Grandpa had it.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember the sugar beet harvests when they would go out and pick all the sugar beets and put them on the train and send them to Chinook?
Yeah, I was pretty little, but the sugar beet dump that we had was right over here,
Oh,
across the tracks.
that'd be kind of over where those grain bins are now.
Yeah. They'd haul sugar beets down and dump them in there. And then they had a conveyor that dumped them into cars.
It's still hard to imagine there being sugar beets around here.
Oh, there were a lot of sugar beets. That field out there, just before the bridge on the east side.
Yeah, the Chester place there.
Yeah, that no, not the Chester
Oh, okay.
place. Before the Milk River Bridge.
Oh, okay, farther up that way. Gotcha.
Where Jones lives now. The flat out there was sugar beets.
Oh wow.
Yeah. There was a lot of sugar beets here. And the trucks, most of them, their beds were side dumps. They would dump sideways. Because the bin that they dumped them in was lengthways.
Oh.
And so they just dump them in sideways, and then the conveyor would take
Put 'em
them up
up.
to the cars. And the cars were open top cars.
So was there still what was it called, the Old Red Bridge down
Yeah.
here at the point?
Yep. There was a bridge there, and then out north of town, there was a trail or road that you took that could go across Rock Creek Bridge,
Okay.
and
So rather than where the North Bridge is now, you would actually go up farther, or would you cross over and then you could cross Rock Creek?
do what now?
The Rock Creek Bridge, how would you get to that at that point?
Well, there's a lane that goes down past Rutherford's.
Okay. So you had to get across the river first, but then you could cross
Yeah,
over Rock
yeah.
Creek to get to the other side.
Right
of the
out
river.
here north of town, where, what's that guy's name that lives right by Milk River Bridge? Anyway,
I couldn't tell
he
you.
works for the railroad.
Okay.
Anyway, there was a 90-degree curve right there, and you went across the river and you're going that way.
Oh, okay.
And that's where the Milk River Bridge was out there. And it was a sharp curve, 90, and then the road going north curves around, it would curve around and go back to where the road is now, on the other side of the bridge.
You know, they changed that a lot when they put the highway in.
They changed a lot.
Yeah. I heard the only real casualty when they did all that is that we lost the ability to have the flagpole in the middle of the road.
Yep.
But if my notes are correct, I believe that's the one that's at the Legion. I think they just cut it off and it's just
Yeah,
shorter.
it's the same flagpole, but
That's nice that we got to keep the pole at least. I'm sure.
yeah,
you've-
that one that was in the middle of the street, it got backed into quite a few times. A few times it got bent.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but didn't break anything. It didn't break or anything. It just
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when you have it in the middle of a road.
especially where there's a bar.
Because it would have been between two bars and a liquor store.
Yeah. Yeah, I was there for quite a while. I remember that flagpole well.
Yeah. Would you tell me the story about the depot fire?
Like what?
Well, wasn't that involved in the money robbery?
Yeah. That was my dad. In fact, Shirley's got all those papers now. I had them. And then my dad knew, or was pretty sure, who, you know, when the depot burned down, and the money used to come in on the train, and Guy Seeley, he was the dray man.
Mhm.
He'd pick up stuff that came off the mail and things that came in off the train. In fact, we'd get a sack of mail here. There was a pole along the tracks that he'd put the sack of mail on that the train would pick up. But they had a deal on this car on the train that had a hook on it, and he'd flip it this way and put the hook and go out this way, and that train would be going through here 50 miles an hour. It'd grab that sack right off of there.
They would swap mail both ways without ever stopping.
Oh, they're going 50 miles an hour. And the guy on the mail car, he'd throw the sack out. He'd throw a sack out, and it'd skittle. I used to watch it. It'd skittle along the tracks.
You didn't want to send anything fragile in the mail, huh?
But anyway, that, I can't remember what his name was. He was a depot operator. And the money always came into the depot, and it got locked into the depot warehouse. And say if it came in at night, or anyway, Guy Seeley, the drayman, would pick it up at the depot and take it to the bank. And anyway, what the hell was his name? I know it. Anyway, he set the depot on fire to cover his tracks. And when Dad knew the money shipment was coming in, they went up and, of course, they found the silver dollar. They were all melted, but the paper dollars, the paper money in bundles, weren't burned completely up. The outside ones were, but the inside were good. And they were missing, most of them. And so they knew something was fishy. And this guy set it on fire and grabbed the money, and Dad, he really pursued it, and I'll get those papers from Stacie and show it to you, but he knew who done it.
There was no doubt in his
when
mind.
They found the money that hadn't burned up.
Who did they think took it before they finally figured out it was him?
I don't know. I don't remember hearing, but just remember. The reason I remember most of it is because what Dad wrote. But
Yeah, I'm betting that did not sit well with him.
But that's the way the money used to come in.
Did they ever rebuild the depot or put anything there afterward, or was that kind of the end of service for Hinsdale at that point?
No, they put a smaller building there, but then everything got modernized and electronic stuff showed up, and goodbye depot.
Just no more train service for Hinsdale. Huh?
No.
So did they put in the Highway 2 by that point?
Yeah.
Did that change things very much, having that better road, or just kind of...
No. Highway 2, just about like it was, only a little wider.
Yeah,
and not quite as many holes. But talking about Highway 2, between here and Glasgow, boy, they need to do some work on that highway. That thing's getting wore out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of traffic on it for a lot of years, and attention has not been up here for a while.
And they're not spending the money on it to fix it up like it should be fixed up, in my estimation. But
it's hard when we start having these population booms in other parts of the state, and that's where the attention always goes.
Oh, it seems like that's where the money goes.
Well, they are trying to expand the road south of Malta, and I appreciate that one.
Yeah.
Being able to, not have to worry about going into the ditch.
That's a dangerous highway. as narrow as it is at places, I'll tell you.
I'm amazed there's not more wrecks on it than there is.
You're right, I am too. That is a very narrow highway and pretty good stretch.
Mhm.
Hey, maybe someday,
No.
when they hit a bunch of oil wells around here.
Well, we'll just get rid of the mosquitoes, and then all the rich people will move in.
Yeah.
Put in a ski resort, right? We'll come down the South Bench.
Well, I've been working on keeping the mosquitoes down. But
What were your kids like growing up?
brats. Like me.
No.
No. What a joy.
No.
Laurel, she was very sharp young lady. Involved in a very good basketball player. Stacie, she kind of like me. She was kind of a brat. But no, she was a very sharp kid. In fact, she was valedictorian. And then along comes some kid called Tyler. Now that's a different story. Kind of acted like his dad. But, oh, it was a joy.
No. How is it being able to have grandkids and now even some great grandkids?
That's great.
You know,
Trouble is, I don't get to see them enough.
you know, life seems to be busier and busier.
Well, and they're so far away. I've been back to see, well, how many years ago? 3, 4? I've been back to Illinois and Wisconsin 3 or 4 times anyway.
How was it when you realized Kendra was going to move back to Wisconsin and it's not too far from where your family kind of came from?
Actually, I don't know too much about Wisconsin, where my grandpa and grandma came from, other than what they told me, and which wasn't a bunch. But I'm trying to remember. I had my other grandma, my mom's dad, divorced a long time ago. And my grandmother her mom lived in Minneapolis. And she came out here in the summer. Mom would come out here in the summer times because my grandmother, my mom's mom, and Maggie Gosh were sisters.
Oh.
And Maggie Gosh lived out here, north of town. And Uncle Dan was her husband. But they came from the Wisconsin people. I can't remember of anybody being in Wisconsin.
Right.
And my grandma, my mom's mom and dad divorced before she got out of high school. And he lived in Bemidji, Minnesota. That's where Babe and the Blue Ox are.
Oh.
Big statue of the ox and of Babe. Right alongside a lake. I've seen it quite a few times. But I'm trying to remember how. My mom would come out in the summertime to visit relatives, the Gosh side. Apparently that's how my mom and dad got connected up. I didn't even really ask them.
You know.
Yeah, I got a picture in front of my mom's or my grandma's house, my mom's mom, in Minneapolis on Park Avenue. That's a busy avenue. But that's where she lived. She had a 2-story house and squirrels. And I'd never seen a squirrel way back then till I went back there when I was a kid.
You know, it's funny how we have them in town now, but
Yeah.
they just have slowly been migrating up the rivers.
Yep. But anyway, they snapped a shot of me down on my hands and knees feeding a squirrel that was out in front of my grandma's house.
Evidently pretty tame.
Well, I used to feed it all the time, and it usually finally would come up to where I was at, and I couldn't pet it or nothing, but I could feed it like this. But if I went to pet it, zoom, he'd go about 5 feet and stop.
I'll take the food, but that's it.
Yep. God, that's been a long time ago.
But it's amazing how those things stay with us.
Yep.
Well, are there any other stories or messages you want to put on here for your kids or grandkids?
Nah, not really.
Well, thank you, DoDad. This was fun. I enjoyed this. You remember a lot more than you think.
Yeah, as I talk, some of it comes back.
You know.
And then as I talk, some of it I screw up.